Well, so thinking about these sort of unthinkable thoughts has led me in a few interesting directions. Why can we not get to that space? I think I mentioned last time the future is not what we think it is. Because if we knew exactly which direction to go, we could just go in that direction. And so there's some kind of barrier. And the question is this like a natural barrier? We just don't have enough neurons. We don't have enough cortical layers to represent the representations and so on. And then there could just be another hierarchy. Or something I've been thinking about more recently is that there's a more practical reason why we can't think these thoughts. And it's kind of a sort of an immune system. That our mind itself is trying to protect us from a variety of thought patterns that would essentially destabilize both our mental patterns and then ultimately our physical self if the thoughts go into a terrible spiral. So from an evolutionary point of view, there might be this kind of filter, this barrier that evolution has instantiated to prevent us from going nutty. From a Darwinian evolution perspective, if we just want to kind of populate the planet the best we can, you don't need this kind of intelligence, right? Intelligence could be kind of a Fermi-style filter that's actually preventing a lot of progress. If we think about the reign the dinosaurs had on the planet, it was 100 million years, 200 million years. And humans haven't had that kind of longevity on the planet yet. And it's hard to imagine us continuing the way we're doing for that much time. But you imagine whales and dolphins, you could easily imagine them doing the same thing they're doing for millions of years into the future and being happy to do it. But this also, leads me to think about what thoughts our language supports. And I used to think that English was good enough, but now I'm not so sure. And I think what's really interesting is we've taught these language models, not just English, but all of the human languages that we could get our hands on. And I think something that's particularly relevant is the computer languages and the mathematical languages that we've also put into that system. So it has representations that it can map into English, but its mind, so to speak, doesn't really operate in English. It operates in these thought vectors, these word vectors that are independent of any particular language. That we have this idea of universal machine, but there's this idea of a Turing tar pit, that just because everything's possible doesn't mean anything's practical with, say, like a Turing machine or some other abstract computer. And so the idea is what computer languages would be sufficient, right? So we could, as an analogy, we could say BASIC is not sufficiently powerful enough of a computer language to instantiate the internet or something like that. Or it might be, but it would require orders of magnitude more complexity in the coding. Whereas something like C ended up being sufficient to kind of create the modern software stack. And so I suspect now that English is not quite as universal as I previously thought it was. This is why I've been looking at things like musical languages and conlangs and esoteric languages to get some ideas about where could we put these unthinkable thoughts. Because when you learn those new languages, you can suddenly think in new, maybe more compact ways. You don't have to have a whole sentence. You can have just sort of one neuron.